Good afternoon, Matt. Good to see you. This is part of the Thrive in 15 set of short interviews about key themes. And you've been invited today because today's theme is to do with men in counselling, men's mental health, and
Yeah.
ways of responding to that. Is that a subject which you know a little bit about?
Yeah, and thanks for inviting me along. I guess when I kind of drill into what you're saying there, I mean, certainly have good experience working with men in the counselling therapeutic aspect, as well as, I guess, some personal experience within it as well, which can often tie quite nicely into how to support men when they're suffering from mental health issues.
When you're talking about personal experience, do you mean as a therapist or as a client?
I guess as a human, as a male human, before I became a counsellor, and it ties in really nicely that something you can maybe explore later on, that kind of theme of being in that process of dealing with my own mental health inspired me to become a counsellor to support other people
Did
with
it?
these particular issues that they're dealing with.
All right. Okay, that's interesting. What was that path that you were inspired by? By what was it inspired you?
Gosh, it's a really good question in general, and one, yeah, I mean, it's something that's really quite important to me as well. The honest answer within all that is that I not only do I work within mental health, but I've lived it. To kind of expand on that, and just to kind of recap over my own journey within that, for a long time, it felt as though I was carrying something quite fragile inside me, like a glass bubble or something delicate,
Yes.
something that could feel quite beautiful when life was steady, something that could turn gently into the light to reflect different colours of self within that. Um, but then something happened. Life takes over, and cracks started to appear. And what I noticed within myself, which equally I noticed with a lot of my male clients, is that there was an urge just to hold it all together, holding this bubble together, to grip it tighter, to protect it, to stop it from breaking. But the tighter I held onto it, the more pressure I placed on it. Those small fractures began to spread, and with them came a growing sense of tension. As all letting go would mean losing everything, but holding on to it became unbearable.
Right.
And it reached a point where it was almost like too painful to hold on to, but equally just as painful to let go of.
Mm. Mm.
And, and trying hard to protect it,
Right.
I ended up crushing the very thing that I was trying to look after, keep
Wow.
safe. And when that happened, it felt like everything fell apart.
Did it?
Like parts of myself that I had relied on, that kept me safe, were scattered across the ground. It shattered everywhere. But over
Sorry.
time, something shifted. I began to see those small fragments weren't just pieces that had been lost. Perhaps they were more like seeds. That's the way I
Mm.
can look at it. Perhaps they're more like seeds, not something to gather up and put back together in the same way that I had previously, but maybe given the right conditions, they could begin to grow into something new.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Is there I don't know whether it's Japanese or Chinese art form in which vases are broken and then glued back together, and that the artistry is in the reforming of the pieces. You're talking about that. I can't remember what the name of that is. I'll look it up. But it's a recognized art form.
Certainly, I mean, like everything, it doesn't happen overnight. It's kind of like what you're saying. Even within that, the Chinese, the Japanese art form, they don't just put them all back together overnight. There was long, difficult periods within that. Times where I felt lost, uncertain,
Yeah.
alone. I didn't always know whether I was coming or going.
Yeah.
Other than simply putting one foot in front of the other.
Do you
Uh,
think in that process was your experience that counselling was any use to you?
the interesting part of that, Kevin, was that within that particular moment, I didn't actually realise counselling was a thing.
Right.
And I mean, because I'm also stretching back into maybe my late 20s. And certainly as I got towards the end of my internal process, that's when I started the counselling journey. And I met with a fantastic male therapist for around 6 sessions. And I really noticed that desire that was within me to learn to support myself, learn to support others, or the will to want to support others. But it took me a while to get to that point. Like most men, I would imagine, I've sat with the intrusive thoughts, and I've sat with the despair, the emptiness, and the loneliness. And these are things that I really feel comes up as a counsellor now. The deep pain, that we can go through, like a constant storm. That's what it feels like, overwhelming, relentless. Slowly I learned how to navigate it, move through it. And I guess within that context of what you're saying there, I find a language for myself. I find a way of coping.
That now is that something which is still live and still supports you now?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Nature for me became a massive part of that process, a
Really, in
huge part of
nature?
that process.
Yeah.
The
When
wilderness,
you say nature, what do you mean by that?
well, nature is in the outdoors,
Right?
external life, the creation that is around us, like the woodlands, being on an island, we're surrounded by water, even the small growth of plants. Each of these wee things, they really captivated me. And I remember that, and this was quite a vivid memory. I remember walking one time, lost in a very kind of deep thought process, and I was just staring at the ground because I was too heavy to lift my head, and I noticed a flower. I noticed a small weed flower cracked through a pavement, and I thought, wow, this little guy here has pushed its way through the most incredible difficulties to get to where it has now, and is standing there proudly producing this wee small flower head. Everybody else would have walked past that, and maybe not necessarily have noticed that, but something changed within me when I seen that, and I thought, well,
Yeah.
if that little guy can do it, then maybe I can. Or
Mhm.
maybe I can find my way back here.
That you've said there, both in terms of your own experience of being young and then moving into counselling and that moment there, there's something about hitting the right moment. It
Yeah,
feels as if that's as a theme that's come up in both of those kind of examples that you have given there, that
yeah,
there was a moment of readiness where you
yes,
could actually see what you needed to see.
yes. The conditions were right.
Yeah,
If if for argument's sake somebody had kind of tried to force me into talking to somebody before then those conditions wouldn't have been met.
right.
But
Yeah,
the fact was in that kind of recognition and having that wee small shift within that internal aspect of self,
yeah,
that allowed me to recognise that, yeah, well, maybe I can push through this. Like
yeah,
the storm, that I'm not trying to change the weather. I'm just trying to get through this. I'm trying to learn how just to be in this, how
yeah.
I can support myself. And then with that aspect in mind, that was actually when I reached out for the counselling process in itself.
Mm,
And being able to just sit with somebody and share things that up until then I didn't have the language prior to be able to understand, and being able to identify that framework, the scaffolding that held me up, and for somebody else just to sit there and empathise with that and support me, not trying to fix, not trying to rescue, but just sit alongside me. That was powerful. That was powerful.
yeah, yeah.
And I remember finishing those sessions and thinking long and hard about my own journey in life and where I'd been and what had kind of led me to where I was, the jobs that I was doing, and recognizing that actually this the parts of self that was scattered on the ground, what I'd noticed was the desire to want to be able to support people, but in that moment not feeling ready to do so. But coming out of that counselling journey, coming out of my own storm, there
Mm.
was a recognition that actually, yeah, maybe I could support people through their own storm.
Yeah. Well, what you're reminding me of as you speak is, that there's the book and the notion of the wounded healer,
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
person who is actually doing the support as you are now, being being somebody who knows wounds because they've been wounded themselves.
yeah.
And I suppose I was trying to work at having gone through that. How do you currently keep yourself healthy from
Uh,
those times of being wounded?
It's a great question. Ultimately, there's a beautiful recognition within me about life and existence. Well, just to simply be here. These things that can really carry me through is tapping back into that journey, not as a reference point, but as somewhere where I've grown from. Learning that actually that those parts of self that once held me up, they crumbled around me, but through that I was able to build resilience and strength. So for me, like I've got a beautiful garden. I can go out and I can just sit and watch nature unfold. I can watch the birds. I can watch a simple butterfly land on a flower, and I take immense joy from these things. I can walk into the woodlands, and I can just feel myself immersed in that whole experience.
Well, what you're describing there has got connections with mindfulness, which is
Yeah.
kind of bringing yourself into the moment. So you're not just
Yes.
sitting you can sit in the garden if you're tired, you can sit in the garden if
Yes.
you wanted a smoke, you can sit in the garden for different reasons. But I guess what you're describing is something about being there and kind of being open to what's around you
Completely. It's about presence and doing it consciously.
consciously.
It's what you're
Right.
exactly saying there. It's about presence and doing it consciously. So it's about just recognizing these small gifts as they appear. And, because within that, there's, as part of my own counselling, part of my own private practice, I'll take men and women, but men out into do walk and talk sessions
All
where we
right.
go into nature and we
Yeah.
can experience this together. And we learn that simply that we're not trying to control the weather, but learn how to walk through it
Right.
and being
So when you're
together in
walking, talking, are you talking about the issues that the person has in
yeah.
their mind, or are you talking about the environment around you?
It's encompasses everything in that moment, and that's
Right.
for me is the beauty of it. I quite often come across men who feel unable to sit with traditional therapy. It can be
Yeah.
difficult, the
Well, I
direct
get
eye
that. I
contact.
mean, one of my pet annoyances is therapy kind of almost blames men for not being able to share their feelings, and I feel that that just annoys me that that traditional understanding of therapy has kind of blames the men for not being able to use it, and I find that really
Yeah,
unhelpful. I almost advise men not to use it. I guess
uh,
what you're suggesting is quite novel, really.
and you're right because even in those moments, that brings on shame. I can't even do counselling properly. I can't even sit here and talk about things. But I mean, no, what I notice is a lot of men don't necessarily always have the language to talk about things, and being able to bring the outdoors into part of the session in itself, where silence doesn't feel intimidating.
Mm,
There's space to pause, there's space to explore, and
mm,
there's opportunity to bring in nature around us as a way to kind of support the internal feelings that are going on. Weather, you'd be surprised, Kevin. I take clients out in all types of weather, and I've been out in torrential rain, I've been out in snow, I've been out in gale force winds,
uh,
and they each bring a different dynamic. And again, it reverts back to that notion of, well, we're
yeah,
not trying to control the weather, we're just trying to learn
yeah,
how to navigate through it.
yeah,
And kind of like inviting clients to recognise that they start to
sure.
find their own resilience within that
Mm,
as well.
yeah,
They go, yeah, actually, right, okay, well, I just need to zip my jacket up here. I need to pull up my hood. Okay, it's all
mm,
right to take shelter. It's okay to
yeah.
embrace the sunshine.
So it's a very concrete way of demonstrating that you're accompanying the person on that journey, even if it's only for that session. But there's, in
Mm,
a very practical and obvious way, you are accompanying the person as you walk
yeah,
together. So I can
yeah,
see the visual impact of that alone, and it
yeah,
does feel
completely.
very useful. One of the things, one of the things which we are going to which we are introducing just
Uh-huh.
now, which is maybe not quite as advanced as what you're talking about. We're just introducing drop-in sessions, which we
Yeah,
hope will be particularly useful
yeah,
for men. So it's kind of like no commitment. We're not tying sign up for counselling. Just come in and talk to somebody to see if the connection's there or not. And
completely.
what do you talk about? Anything you've got in your mind, anything that's bothering you, just come in and we just offer them as quite short session
Yeah,
so as a way to help people get to a point where the point that you got to get to a point where they are actually ready to look at things or ready to
yeah.
experience things. So we're doing something within the organization to promote that. But then the idea that you've got there of going out into nature and walking with somebody, I think is also a lovely idea.
I mean, it's the thing that I notice about it. It's not that it's any better than traditional counselling, but it's a great alternative.
Yeah.
And for me, and then kind of like what you're saying there as well, it's about offering choice, for those people that might
Yes.
might struggle
Yeah.
with it. And
Yeah.
I mean, I've always sat there, and I recognise that within myself at the time. I've always wondered like how many people have not engaged. Kind of something similar to what you're saying. How many people have not engaged in therapy because it's too difficult for them to sit
Yeah.
in a therapeutic room. And I thought, well, how can we push those boundaries? And I mean, it's nothing new. When we go back hundreds of years or even thousands of years or back to those primal states when, the various communities and clans and chieftains, they'd sit and they'd maybe take people out for walks and they'd talk. They wouldn't have the therapeutic room as such. There's something quite dare I say, manly about just being out in the wilderness, the ruggedness, ducking under trees or pushing through the bracken, and these are the things that connect us back into, not just into the nature around us where we can feel the ground underneath our feet, but
Yeah.
they help for us to reconnect back into something
Yeah.
that's missing.
Matthew, just in terms of people who might be listening to this, and we just discussed how sometimes it can be problematic for different reasons for men to look for the help that they really want. Any hints and tips or very simple takeaways that you might suggest at this point?
Yeah, I think it starts with recognizing that you don't have to begin with a big conversation. Even noticing something doesn't feel quite right can be a meaningful first step. But what your experience is valid, and even if others do have it worse, that doesn't make your experience any less important because you matter. And you don't have to navigate it alone. You're not broken. So this isn't about being fixed. It's about finding support at a time that's right for you.
Well, thanks very much for giving us these ideas. This is just a short introduction to
Yeah.
that. We might have a longer session subsequent to this to explore that a bit more. But for the sake of at least introducing people to the idea, this has been a really nice opportunity. And I appreciate you sharing your own personal experiences with us. So thank you for that. And just thank you for your time.
Well, and thank you as well for the opportunity.
Okay.
Brilliant.